Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today's What's for Dinner video. I have 4 fun new dinner ideas for you guys. I tried some fun stuff this week, and this is my first week back from postpartum, so I only have 4 recipes. I hope you guys don't mind. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get into What's for Dinner. I started off the week with this delicious roast beef. This was made in the Instapot. I will walk you through how I did it. It turned out very tender and juicy. And I will also be sharing this amazing recipe for twice baked potatoes. So I started off with this beef roast, and it is frozen when I'm putting this in the Instapot. I just added some chopped up onions, some minced garlic, salt, pepper, and a bit of beef broth for the liquid in the bottom of the Instapot. And just a tip, anytime I cook frozen meat in the Instapot, I always Google or search on Pinterest for like the time and stuff, because I can never remember, and it does vary based on the weight of whatever you're cooking, but it's really easy to just Google that and find that information. So I found mine was an hour and a half. Now moving on to the twice baked potatoes. So I started by brushing the outside of my russet potatoes with vegetable oil. I used canola oil, and then bake those for about an hour in the oven until they are fully cooked. Now for the filling for the twice baked potatoes, I used 1 stick of butter chopped up to make it easier to mix in, as well as about half a cup of sour cream and half a cup of bacon bits. I definitely recommend that you let your baked potatoes cool just a little bit before you do this step, because they will be very hot. As you can see, mine are still steaming even though I let them cool off for a few minutes. Then you just go ahead and cut your potatoes in half and scoop out the insides. I like to leave about maybe 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch of potato on the shell so that it retains some of its shape. Otherwise the shell will just kind of fall apart. But the fact that we added the oil before we bake them really does help the shells of the potatoes, the skins of the potatoes, kind of retain their shape, and it also adds to the flavor. And yes, this is the most time intensive part of the recipe, along with filling them back up, but it's really worth it. These, not only are these an amazing side to something really decadent like a beef roast, but they also heat up really well and make great little meals or snacks throughout the week because they're so compact. You can just kind of stick them on a plate and heat them up if you want leftovers, which I always appreciate. So I definitely found this recipe to be a keeper. Also, I don't know if you guys can hear my newborn in the background, but I currently have her in my sling and she is snoring, so I apologize if you hear any heavy baby breathing. This is my first time recording since giving birth, and obviously you may be able to tell I'm still pregnant in this video, but I'm finally getting it together to kind of get my videos back going. So still working out all the kinks, still got my baby right on me, but you know, it's all part of parenting, right? And even though my butter wasn't fully softened when I added it, because the potatoes are so hot, the heat from those helped to melt the butter and helped everything to combine. So I am taking a break from adding ingredients and mashing it all up, mixing it all up, and then I'm going to continue to add the ingredients for the rest of the filling. So here I am adding about 1/4 cup of whole milk. Then I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of shredded cheese, whatever kind of cheese you like. I use the Fiesta blend. I think sharp cheddar would be really good in there as well. And then just salt and pepper. If you have fresh green onions, that would be amazing too, or even chives or something. I didn't have that on hand, so I didn't add that this time. But I tell you, when my garden gets up and running here in hopefully a few weeks, I will have some fresh chives to add to my potatoes. Alright, now it's time for the fun part, filling the potato shells back up. Just fill them up until you've used up all the filling, really, and they can obviously be mounding over because of the consistency. You can really kind of push it in there and make them nice and full because that makes them delicious. And then once all of the potato skins are full, I top them with a little bit of additional cheese and pop them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes until everything was heated through and the cheese was melted. Alright, that is dinner for the first night. The roast, like I said, turned out absolutely delicious in the Instapot. Definitely recommend that, especially if you have frozen meat and you run out of time. And the twice baked potatoes were absolutely delicious as well. Okay, next up is this creamy chicken and wild rice soup. So starting with my veggies, how do you like this edit? Boom. I'm getting creative, what can I say? So I started by chopping up the celery, carrots, and onions, and now I am taking some chicken breast that I had frozen and adding the veggies and adding all of it into the crock pot, and I'm just gonna let it all cook for most of the day. So I'm also adding half a cup of wild rice as well as about half a cup of long grain white rice. Then I added enough chicken broth to cover everything, and I did go back throughout the day and add more chicken broth as the rice absorbed it, just kind of eyeballing that. Now for the herbs, I am adding some thyme and rosemary. They're both dried, but if you have fresh, you can do that as well. Then I just added some salt, pepper, and minced garlic, and I covered that and let it cook all day for about 8 hours on low. Alright, after it's been cooking for about 8 hours, or the chicken is cooked all the way through, I did actually remove the chicken breasts and shredded them with a fork just so that we have bite-sized pieces in the soup. Then I added the chicken back to the soup and went on to make the creamy portion of the soup. Alright, and this is kind of a replacement for like a cream of chicken soup or something. I just started with half a cup of butter, completely melted that, and then whisked in about 3 tablespoons of flour. Once that's all whisked in, I let that cook and bubble for a minute or two until the flour is all cooked. Then I am adding 1 cup of heavy whipping cream and whisking that in as well. Letting that come to a boil, it will thicken up just a little bit, make sure it is all mixed together, and then go ahead and add that right to the soup, and that will make the chicken and rice soup a creamy chicken and rice soup. This turned out so delicious. Everything was perfect. I did end up freezing about half of it, and it heated up really well. It was a little bit thicker, not really like a soup when I reheated it after being frozen, but this was a delicious meal and I will definitely be making this one again. So I just served it with some French bread from the freezer, and that was our dinner for this night. Okay, next we have some fried tilapia with some buttery sweet potatoes, some ranch rice, and some fried sauteed Brussels sprouts. So to make this ranch flavored rice, I added about 1/4 cup of ranch seasoning, and I would recommend adding less if you do try this recipe, maybe like a couple tablespoons, because the ranch flavor was just a little too strong for me. But I also added half a stick of butter as well as a cup of long grain rice, and I'm just going to cook that while I prepare the rest of the food. So for these sweet potatoes, I started by peeling 2 medium large sized sweet potatoes. Then I chopped the potatoes into about 1-inch thick discs and put them on a baking sheet, drizzled them with some melted butter, and sprinkled them with some coarse sea salt. I personally didn't love this recipe either because I don't like sweet things and salty things mixed together. I probably could have predicted that, but if you do, go ahead and try it. When I make this again, I'll probably use brown sugar instead of salt. Alright, next for the Brussels sprouts, I started with a pack of Brussels sprouts, washed them, chopped off the ends, and then cut them in half. And this is the way that I have been preferring to make Brussels sprouts rather than roasting them in the oven. I like to do them in this saute pan because I have a little more control over how cooked they get and also how crispy they get. I just think they taste a little bit better this way. So this is kind of a new way for me to cook Brussels sprouts. But I start with some butter in the pan, melt that all the way down, and then I throw in my Brussels sprouts, and that's pretty much it. I cook it on, I would say, medium low heat. You don't want to cook it too high, but you want to have it high enough that they do get a little crispy. And I do cover them. That allows them to kind of steam and get cooked all the way through. I find sometimes when I do them in the oven, they don't get cooked all the way through, even though they get really crispy on the outside. So that's kind of why I like to cook them this way. And then since my rice was running out of liquid and looking like it needed to cook a little bit more, I added a bit of milk, also to sort of increase that creaminess. And here are the Brussels sprouts. As you can see, they are starting to get cooked down. I added some garlic salt. You can add regular salt or whatever seasonings you would like. Garlic salt is a very good addition in my opinion. And when these Brussels sprouts were done cooking, I did just remove them from this pan and put them in a separate dish so that I could quickly cook the fish in this pan as well, since fish takes a really short amount of time to cook. I didn't want to use an extra pan. So starting off, I melted another half a stick of butter, and once that was melted, I added some minced garlic to flavor the butter. Let that garlic simmer for a minute or two, and then I added in my fish fillets. This is tilapia. I get it frozen and I just like run it under like cool water to thaw it before I cook it, and it's a really easy, quick meal to pull out of the freezer if you haven't planned anything and you want a protein. It's a really nice, quick way to cook a protein. And after about 15 minutes of baking in the oven, I took the sweet potatoes out and flipped them and put them back in the oven for another about 15 minutes or until they are soft when pierced with a fork. Alright, checking on the rice, it looks about done, and as you can see, this is one of those dinners that has a lot of different dishes going at once. It's kind of fun to do that sometimes, but I don't do that all the time. So for the tilapia, after that's been cooking for about 3 or 4 minutes on one side and starting to look pretty well cooked, I flip it over and let it cook for a couple minutes on the other side. And right before serving, I did squirt a little bit of lemon juice over there just for some extra flavor. And that is the dinner. It was really good. Like I said, the ranch rice was a little strong. I would use a little bit less ranch seasoning, but everything was really delicious and filling. Okay, next I made Philly cheesesteak sandwiches with Hasselback potatoes. This was a total pregnancy craving thing for me. I felt like a Philly cheesesteak sandwich, so I thought I would give it a go. So starting with the Hasselback potatoes, they're basically just yellow potatoes cut into small wedges, but you leave a little bit of space on the bottom so they're still attached. And then you place them in a baking dish, cover them with melted butter. I added a bit of garlic salt as well, and then you just bake them in the oven. Alright, now for the Philly cheesesteak sandwiches. Like I said, this is a new recipe. I've never made these from scratch before. I don't know if this counts completely from scratch because I did use a different kind of meat that you'll see in a minute, but I did most of it from scratch. So starting with 2 green peppers, a red pepper and a yellow pepper, I cut them into strips. I also grabbed a yellow onion, peeled and cut that into strips as well. And And then I saw this interesting steakums sliced steak meat. It's very processed, so you know it's probably not the healthiest choice, but I thought it would be interesting to try for a little bit of an easier meal. So I did end up trying that. So starting with some olive oil in my pan, I am sauteing the onions and peppers until they start to turn a little bit translucent. Then I arranged a little space in the middle here and threw in the meat. Like I said, this meat was really weird. I can honestly say I wouldn't get this again. It was just not what I expected, and it didn't taste that great. It was really easy to overcook it, but it was fun to try. So I started by ripping it into small pieces, as you can see, and just tossed it in there and then allowed it to kind of thaw and cook in the pan with the veggies. After a while, I realized that the peppers and onions were going to get overcooked if I left them in, so I did end up taking them out. It also gave me more space to work with to add the rest of the meat. I had 2 packets of this meat, and it really wasn't as much as I thought it would be with one, so I ended up adding 2. After the potatoes had cooked for a while, I took them out of the oven and added more butter and put them back in the oven to continue cooking. After the meat was all the way cooked, I added the peppers and onions back in and mixed them all together. And then to finish it off, I added a bit of minced garlic and a couple dashes of Worcestershire sauce. Alright, so I just used some hoagie rolls and loaded up the meat and pepper mixture on the rolls, and then I added some provolone cheese on top and baked those in the oven just until the cheese was melted and the buns were toasted. I did add butter to the top part of the buns so that those got nice and toasted as well. Okay, these turned out really well. Also, the meat, like I said, it was a little weird. I'll probably try doing it with just some of our own local beef that we get next time I make these. But other than that, it was really good, and the potatoes were great. I did serve my potatoes with some sour cream and cheese on top, and this was a really great meal. And that is it for this What's for Dinner video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again very soon. Bye!